Hello and welcome to the EcoCast. Today's topic, supporting, securing, and enhancing Microsoft-Centric Environments. Thank you so much for joining us. This event is produced by Actual Tech Media, and on the EcoCast today, you'll hear from experts at Druva, Veeam, and Pure Storage. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the moderator. We at Actual Tech Media created the EcoCast, MegaCast, and Summit event series to help educate IT professionals, such as yourselves, about the latest and greatest in enterprise technology to help you do it quickly and efficiently from the comfort of your home or home office, and to get all your questions answered. We at Actual Tech Media are all former IT professionals ourselves, and so we know how tough it can be in the trenches of IT. The goal of this event is to help you solve your technology challenges, specifically around, of course, supporting, securing, and enhancing your Microsoft-centric IT infrastructure. So with that, let's just cover a few things before we get started on today's topic. We do have a number of awesome prizes. I'll be talking about the prizes you may have heard of in just a moment, as well as the eligibility requirements for those prize drawings. I mentioned questions. You can find the questions tab there in your audience console. It's right next to the word handouts, and I can go ahead and draw your attention to the questions tab that way. Of course, we welcome all your hello and good morning and howdy messages from across the United States and around the world. Thank you so much for those. But we also want your technical questions, and we have a best question prize as well to help shake some of those questions loose, if you will. We also have a number of poll questions that we'll be doing throughout the presentation today, and I'll be sharing the results of most of those poll questions with you. So we appreciate your participation in the polls in advance. The polls will come up just right there in the slides window, and you answer the polls within the slides window, and you'll see the results there as well. We also want this to be a social event. You can tweet directly from your console using the Twitter icon on the bottom of the panel there. If you click on that, the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically appended when you tweet. We'll be monitoring Twitter throughout the event, and of course, we appreciate you sharing this event, what you're learning here with your friends and family. And then finally, resources. There on the handouts tab, you'll find resources hand-selected from today's expert presenters, one for each of today's sponsors, Pure Storage, Veeam, and Druva. So make sure that you check out those resources before you go. Now, I mentioned that we have prizes today on the EcoCast. We have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. You must be live in attendance to qualify for the drawing. There are some more legalese prize terms and conditions that you should be aware of. They're in the handouts tab. I will be announcing the winners of these gift cards throughout the event, and we'll be contacting them after the event via email. All prize winners must be able to submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. We also have our best question prize for an Amazon $50 gift card, one for each session. So today that's 3 presentations, 3 Amazon $50 gift cards as kind of our bonus prizes. We will reach out to the prize winners after the event. And of course, to enter, you also need to meet the Actual Tech Media prize policy, and you have to ask a question. That's kind of the number one most important thing is you got to ask a question, and so we appreciate your questions in advance. Now, the Actual Tech Media EcoCast and MegaCast events over the years have donated thousands of dollars to charity thanks to generous prize winners who win a prize and opt to donate that prize to charity. We have the selected charities you see here on the screen. So if you win a prize today and you say, I got enough stuff from Amazon already, I want to help someone less fortunate than myself, we would love to help you do that as well. We've also done that in partnership with the Gorilla Guide Book Club. You can find a link to the gorilla.guide book club there in your handouts tab as well. You can download free educational full-length ebooks from gorilla.guide. Tons of new titles being released all the time on all sorts of enterprise IT topics. So make sure that you check that out. The hashtag for today's event, if you tweet directly from the console, is ATM EcoCast. Feel free to follow Actual Tech Media on Twitter as well, and me, David M. Davis, too. Also, I want to remind you to subscribe to all the Actual Tech Media social channels. You can do that there on the top right-hand side of your audience console. You'll find a link to YouTube, Facebook, and our 10 on Tech podcast, as well as our LinkedIn page. That's where we post all of our latest and greatest content. All right, now before I introduce you to our first presenter on the EcoCast today, I've got just a little bit of keynote stage setting type content here at the start where we're going to chat about, yes, I appreciate your input on the polls that are coming up. I want to make this a conversation as much as we can here electronically. I want to get your feedback on the polls, and I want to talk to you a little bit about, why today's topic is so important. And so while we do that, let's just think for a moment about our Microsoft-centric environments. I know many companies out there have, especially with the pandemic, have been looking more towards cloud-based solutions. Maybe they don't have as much physical access to the data center. Maybe the cloud just seems more efficient. Things like Office 365, Microsoft Azure, being able to leverage some of these services that in the past, required a lot of folks to be in the data center, racking and stacking equipment. You've got power and cooling issues to be concerned about, whereas cloud-based solutions just in many ways are more efficient, make the company more agile, hopefully enable you to do more with less. So to that note, why are companies looking to Microsoft 365 and Azure? And by the way, in case you haven't heard, it's been renamed from Office 365 to Microsoft 365. If I call it Office 365, please forgive me in advance. But stats have told us that now 1 in 5 companies use Microsoft 365. And what I was surprised to learn actually is that by user count, Microsoft 365 is the most widely used cloud service. I found that interesting. 650,000 plus users of Microsoft 365 alone, just in the United States. 750 million active users of Teams. We use Microsoft Teams here at Actual Tech Media, and I can tell you, I don't know what we would do without it. Sometimes I don't know what to do with it either, but I don't know what we would do without it because it's really how we work these days. It's how we communicate as a team, as a company. So I know Teams has experienced massive growth over the last year. According to one quote I found, they said that Azure has now closed the gap with AWS in terms of user adoption. And these are some of the references. I can post them, if you will, in the questions box if you'd like to learn more about those types of statistics. But Azure and Microsoft 365 adoption is rapidly growing. So the question is, when jumping into these types of services, what do you need to know? What are some of the gotchas? Well, they aren't a panacea. They aren't perfect. There are some things you need to know. And the first one being data protection and disaster recovery is just not built in. So don't assume that, hey, just because I put my data in the cloud, it's 100% protected, nothing will ever happen to it. You still need to, protect your data. There's the 3-2-1 rule, having 3 copies of your data with, 2 of those copies off-site, or 2 of those copies on-site, 1 off-site. Hopefully I didn't get it wrong. But basically, you still need to protect yourself from data loss in the cloud. It is possible to get ransomware. It is possible for a data center to burn down. There's a recent story in Europe where that did happen. I can send you a link to that if you'd like to see some horrific pictures of a massive data center with fire trucks spraying water inside of it. So make sure that you protect your data even if it is in the cloud. And I know we're going to be learning about a couple of data protection and disaster recovery options on the event today. Then you do need additional security tools. Don't assume that Microsoft 365 or Azure are simply just secure out of the box. Keep looking for additional security solutions for your IT infrastructure, even when it is in the cloud. Also keep in mind ongoing costs with a consumption-based pricing model. You don't want to be surprised. So there are cost calculation, cost optimization tools out there to help you get the most of these cloud-based services. And even Microsoft 365 has multiple different tiers. So you want to make sure you're selecting the right tier for your company. You want to make sure you're getting the most out of that. Sometimes it's better to choose maybe a little bit lower tier and then use a third-party product. There's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, as they say. And then look for ways to unify management of your cloud services. So yes, you can have too many clouds and too many SaaS services. And I know a lot of companies, as they've moved to cloud and moved to SaaS, it's great. You gain efficiencies. But once you have 6 or 10 different SaaS services and you're using multi-cloud with 2 or 3 different clouds, things can get very, very messy and very overly complex. And then also applications. You don't want to lift and shift applications unless there's no other choice, meaning consider new ways to do things with your applications. Don't just take your old Windows application and put it in a Windows VM in the cloud and say it's been cloudified because nothing really changed, right, other than the location of the app and the data. So look for new ways to modernize your applications as you move to the cloud. And with that, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you're doing when it comes to adopting Microsoft cloud-based solutions. So I've just brought up a poll question that says, where are you in the process of adopting Microsoft cloud-based solutions? And this should really be a single select question. I apologize for that. So please just select one option on here. It's either, you put everything in the cloud today, or maybe some apps and data are in Microsoft Cloud. Maybe you're just using Microsoft 365 for email and Office things right now, and everything else is on premises. Or maybe you're not using any Microsoft Cloud-based solutions today. All right, thank you for all the excellent responses. We got a lot of responses. I do appreciate that. And I just shared out the results. And look at that. Actually, I'm very pleased to see that. It looks like, don't make me do math live, but 84% of companies on the event today, add up the other 4%, so that would be 88% either have all their apps and data in Microsoft Cloud, or they're at least using Microsoft 365. So a lot of Microsoft adoption being seen here in the Actual Tech Media audience. Thank you for that. Second of 3 poll questions before I introduce you to our first presenter is on the screen, and that is, which of these are your greatest concerns when adopting cloud-based solutions? And this is a multi-select question, so feel free to select more than one answer here. Maybe you're concerned about security, data protection, DR, unknown cost or a high cost, not really knowing the cost. I know I've heard from a lot of companies that simply educating their IT staff is a real challenge that they face. We've been doing the same thing for 20 years with the same data center, the same infrastructure. The idea of re-educating our staff to learn, how Azure and Office 3 or Microsoft 365 work or AWS works is a real challenge for a lot of companies out there. And if there's a concern that's not listed, feel free to drop it there in the questions box, and I will share it with the audience. I want to hear your feedback, and I want to improve this poll question for the next event. All right, thank you everyone who responded to that. And I just shared the results. Looks like 63% said security. That's the #1 concern out there when adopting cloud-based services, followed by 55% who said data protection and DR, then 47% who said unknown or high cost. So thank you everyone who responded to that poll. And then final poll before I introduce you to our first presenter on the EcoCast today. And this should be a quick question. That is, what's your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions here, specifically around supporting, securing, and enhancing Microsoft environments? So if you're looking to improve your data protection or security or cost management solutions that you use at your IT organization, here the question is just around what's your time frame? And I see some responses coming in. One person said data privacy compliance. That is a concern with moving to the cloud. Another person said they second security as being the number one concern. Someone else said compliance is a big concern at their organization. Someone else said cost, concerns about cost. So thank you for sharing those. I do appreciate that. And we will be talking about many of those things on the EcoCast today. I've seen sneak peeks of the presentations. All right, thank you everyone who responded to this poll question here about your time frame. So with that, it's time to kick off today's EcoCast. I'm excited now to introduce our first presenters. Welcome Marcia Pierce, Director of Field Solutions Architecture, and Radha Manga, Senior Director for Solutions Strategy, both at Pure Storage. Marcia and Radha, take it away.
Hi, my name is Marcia Pierce, and I'm the Director of Solutions Architecture here at Pure Storage. And today I'm going to be talking to you about supporting and securing your kind of Microsoft environment. And I'm also going to show you a demo by Radha Manga, our Senior Director of Solution Strategy around Rapid Restore. But let's talk a little bit about our Microsoft. I've been a DBA for a long time, right? Worked on the customer side before joining Pure. And one of the things that drove me crazy was when I had to do a restore of a very large database, right? Because there was only so much you could do during that restore situation, right? And when that happens, everybody's sitting around your desk asking you when it's going to be done. And you know, it's not done yet. It's not going to be done any quicker, right? How long is it going to take? It's going to take a little bit longer than I told you last time. That's all we can do when it comes to restoring databases. So I will say, as I had really large databases in the hundreds of terabytes, right, that we were always talking about sometimes restoring, one of the things that we always asked was, how quickly can I restore it? And the thing that was always the fastest and that was our go-to was one, keeping our backups directly attached to disk. And we would use storage-based solutions, but they were always complex and very expensive to restore these really large databases. But I wanted you to really know what is kind of works for these storage-based snapshots, right? Ours are free with the storage. You don't have to quiesce, with a couple of caveats, and we'll talk about when you have to quiesce and don't, right? There's no agent running on the host. Ours are very lightweight, right? They take very little space and they're really easy and simple to do. So let's talk about, like, when I'm cloning a database, which is like the same as like trying to restore it. This is like the basics of what a code looks like, right? And if you look here, only this line where it says the new PFA volume is the only line that's Pure specific. Everything else is just talking to SQL Server saying, hey, stop the SQL Server database, take it offline before I kind of override it and do a restore. So let's do a really quick demo. I'm going to show you my lab environment. Let's go over to this box first. Here I've got a 1.7 terabyte database, right? And this is the activity. I didn't want to show you a demo where I'm not doing anything. So I've got a whole bunch of batch scripts that you can see down here that are inserting data into this database, right? And so I've got activity, and I'm going to copy this. Like, let's say I'm going to restore it to another machine, the same FT demo database, and it's only 6 gigs. How long is that going to take you? Well, I showed you the basics of the script a second ago, and I said it doesn't take very long. And if I can get my mouse back, which has now disappeared, when I go over here and I run this script, right, this base script, and here is again my line that's doing the overwrite, I'm already done. And when I go over here and I see that I have now restored to another machine, by the way, not consuming any extra space because we do a global dedupe, a 1.7 terabyte database, I think this is really interesting. This is a thing to talk about with ransomware, right? Because the first thing they're going to do is lock your database and like delete your backup. So I'm leveraging a snapshot to do this restore. We can also secure the snapshots in what we call safe mode, so they can't be deleted from the array. So should that happen, you can quickly go back to one of your snapshots and do a restore. And these are our crash consistent, right? So they do not interact with the SQL Server transaction log in any way. But what if, one, you don't like scripting, right? That bit of PowerShell was too much for you, and you want to apply a transaction log backup to it, right? That's when I tell people they need to look at the BSS snapshots that we've historically used. If you need more granularity than every 5 minutes, well, we also have a plugin. We can take BSS snapshots, and you can work with lots of backup vendors to coordinate those on Pure. But we've also built a plugin into the SQL Server Management Studio so that if you want to, you can right-click on a database. And this one right here is a 4.5 terabyte database. How long does it take you to back it up, right? So what we're doing is we're writing basically the snapshot in a way that it is talking to our backup chain so that we can interact with it, and it's interjected into our backup chain. So from the GUI, it's auto-detecting all the drives that my database is attached to, right? And now I have a backup, right? What do you do with this backup, right? I didn't have to deal with my storage admins or anybody else. Well, when I want to go do a restore of my 4.5 terabyte database, I can pick, right? I can see the date and time that these snapshots were taken. And this one was just taken on the 6th of, right? So that's the one I want. So if I just clicked a regular restore, it would have worked just like the demo I showed you before. But when I check this no recovery mode, it's going to put the database in a restoring state so I can apply my SQL Server transaction logs. I can also choose to mount it to another drive or machine. So let's click, oh, the wrong restore. So not a big deal. I want to apply my transaction logs, right? We'll let this go for a second and we'll see that it worked just like this snapshot demo that I showed you just a second ago, right? And you can see that we have got our database up in that state that we had before, but let's go back and get it into that restoring state so that we can apply our SQL Server transaction logs. We're going to check this little no recovery box, and then you're going to see the difference, right? And that using and not using that no recovery box, right, is also what you may have seen in the past where you've had a kind of storage-based solution break your backup chain, because when you don't do no recovery, when you're taking a snapshot, when you don't do that copy only, it will act as the primary backup. But now when I do this refresh, what you can see right here is my database is now in a restoring state, and I can apply my transaction logs to it to roll it forward to that point in time. Again, crash consistent we looked at first. Those can go as low as every 5 minutes, but when you need to get to an exact minute, and that's really urgent for you, that's when I say, look at the BSS, which is coordinated from the Windows host side. And again, built right here into the GUI. So that is the primary way that I talk about restoring databases, but that is tied to your own array. Again, you can turn safe mode on so that nobody can delete your snapshots so that you're protected in a ransomware event. But let's talk about some other things, right? What can you do with these, right? It's going to reduce when you're leveraging the storage-based snapshots, your networking and your compute and your overhead. The clones are free, right? You're reducing that restore time that costs your company money, that downtime. If you're going to a data warehousing environment, you know, a lot of times in the evening, you're spending your time shipping data over there. Well, if you can ship it without consuming space in just a few seconds, those are all great things. And you can leverage snapshots for AGs, database mirroring, replication to fix it all, right? Still use your AGs, but when they break, use snapshots to do them, but those are tied to an array. So I like to have a layered strategy, right? So the other thing, you know, we were talking about this data growth. Let's talk about this real quick, because when you start leveraging snapshots more and you're putting your data on an array that reduces across the entire array and not individual volumes, you can see some things like this customer here who was doing a lot of work kind of in this is their production environment. So they're getting a 10:9 data reduction, 10.9 to 1 data reduction. That's not including thin provisioning. It's much higher when you include thin provisioning. But when you look at their test dev environment where they have lots of copies of the data set, they're getting 43 to 1, right? So this is where you could talk about having your really large data sets down in test dev, not consume a lot of cost, right? Space, and that inherent cost when you have lots of clones and copies of your data. And you can do it really, really quickly. So you become more agile. But right, I'm a DBA. I like my backups. I'm not going to get rid of my backups because they have saved me. I love my backups, right? And so I always want you to think about keeping your backups, right? That downtime costs you a lot of money and it is your last go-to should something happen. So, right, when people have historically told me to take my backups and copy them someplace else and no longer keep them on locally attached disks, I would not do it because restore times were going to be impacted. And that is what cost my company a lot of money. So when we start looking at some new technology, which is our FlashBlade, which we call a unified fast and file and object store, right? It's not your typical storage that you use, but the FlashBlade, you can do some really cool things, like just take regular backups and make them super fast. I don't care if you're using something like Lightspeed or SQL Safe or Ola Halligan scripts. It just makes the target really, really fast. So I'm going to show you a demo from Murata Minga that he did where he is restoring from the FlashBlade. This is our basic script, right? It's a SQL Server backup script. We're just striping it to 7 drives. So I'm going to let Rada talk, and we're going to look at the FlashBlade backup.
Business critical asset. Being able to back up and recover their critical databases has been a struggle for many. The ability to recover SQL Server databases in time can be a make or break situation for many businesses. In this demo, we'll show how you can achieve terabyte per minute or more of backup rate for SQL Server environments. Yes, you heard it right, a terabyte per minute. And we'll show you how quickly and easily you can recover. We achieved more than 60 terabytes per hour of SQL backup and restore rates by simply using SQL Server Management Studio and Pure Storage FlashBlade, a unified fast file and object storage. With its multi-dimensional performance and scalability, the FlashBlade setup is simple without needing ongoing maintenance. With FlashBlade, you can start as few as 7 blades and grow to multiple petabytes of backup storage capacity non-disruptively with 0 configuration changes to your backup scripts. Now, let us dive into the demo. Here we have a 30-blade FlashBlade system, and we have 8 SQL Server instances. Each instance is deployed on its own physical server. Each SQL instance has a 2 terabyte database deployed on a flash array using 4 LUNs for data and 1 LUN for log. There are 2 flash arrays hosting a total of 8 databases, so 4 databases for each flash array. All these databases use SQL Management Studio for backup and recovery, and they're actually backing up to a FlashBlade. The backup of each database is spread across 8 files distributed across 8 different volumes on the FlashBlade. Each database has its own backup directory in each of these 8 volumes. Now let us trigger a full database backup from all these 8 servers. Before we start our backup, here you can find these 8 servers, and I have remote desktop into all 8 of them. Let us look at one of the servers. In this SQL Server instance, as I said, there is a database called POCDB, and let us run a space report on this. It is a 2 terabyte database. The database is spread across 4 different LUNs, 4 files here, and the total space consumed is little over 2 terabytes. And we have 8 such databases across these instances. We are actually triggering the backup using a very simple script, which is each database is being backed up to 8 different files, and these 8 different files are in DOREM volume SMB 001 all the way to SMB 008. And we are also using a separate data WIP for each of those volumes, just to maximize the bandwidth. And we are using the compression for the database. That means we are compressing the backups before being sent to FlashBlade. We have seen a lot of our customers using compression for their backups, so we have chosen to just test with that. Okay, now let us go and actually trigger a backup on all these servers simultaneously. Let's check what is happening on FlashArray and FlashBlades. As you can see, the backup is slowly ramping, and each of these arrays are almost doing very close to 10 gigabytes a second. Let us do some Camtasia magic because this is going to take some time to back up. I'm fast forwarding the video at this point. As you can see, the databases are being backed up at roughly 10 gigabytes per second on each of these arrays. And that's a cumulative total of 20 gigabytes per second or 72 terabytes per hour or more than a terabyte a minute, as I was telling. Let us look at what is happening on FlashBlade at the same time. As I said, we are using compression at the SQL Server backup level. So we are roughly seeing 6.5, 7 gigs of write bandwidth onto FlashBlade, 20 gigs of read from flash arrays being written to 7 gigabytes on the FlashBlade. We see that the backup activity on both the flash arrays here has subsided to almost zero. Now let us see what is happening on FlashBlade. It is also complete here. Let us see what the SQL Server Management Studio thinks. I have shown this database earlier. It is a 2 terabyte database. The 2 terabyte database has been backed up at the rate of 2,578 megabytes per second. Remember, there are 8 such databases that were happening in parallel. As you can see, I have deleted all the POC databases from all these 8 instances, and also have loaded the database restore script, which is again a very simple script. We are pointing it to all the 8 files corresponding to its backup and asking it to restore or full restore this database. Let's trigger restore from all these 8 database instances simultaneously. Let us check what is happening on flash arrays and FlashBlade. We can see the write bandwidth or ingest getting into the flash arrays nicely ramping. Each of these flash arrays is roughly doing 6 gigabytes a second. That is cumulative 12 gigabytes of restore bandwidth, which is 43 terabytes per hour. In this case, the restore rate is being limited by the ingest rate of flash arrays. With more flash arrays, we can hit even higher restore rates easily. Let us check what is happening on the FlashBlade. This is a 3-to-1 compressible database. As you can see, the database is hitting anywhere from 3.5 to 4 gigs a second. That is expected. We are reading 4 gigabytes from FlashBlade, and we are ingesting 12 gigabytes into those 2 flash arrays. This restore is going to take some time because this is 16 terabytes of data being restored at roughly 43, 44 terabytes per hour. So it's going to take some time. So I'm going to fast forward this demo. The database restores are complete against all the 8 servers here. We do not see any IO activity on the flash arrays. Let's check the FlashBlade. And we can also confirm the read from FlashBlade is also completed. Let's check the database instances. Let's go to one of these systems and refresh the database tab. And we now see the POC database. And how long did it take? You can clearly see that the SQL Server Management Studio thinks the database was recovered at 1,479 megabytes per second. Remember, we have 8 of these databases restoring at the same time. Let us quickly summarize what we have seen. The simplicity of SQL Server backup and recovery solution with FlashBlade. To achieve these rates, there are very minimal tuning required for either SQL Server Management Studio or FlashBlade, as you saw. We simply created 8 SMB volumes and streamed our backups there and did not tune anything on the SQL Server Management Studio other than max transfer size and buffer count. And we demonstrated terabyte per minute or higher backup rate and tens of terabytes per hour of restore rates. As I pointed earlier, the restores could have been faster if we had few more flash arrays. Now the icing on the cake, you can also leverage the safe mode feature of FlashBlade to safeguard your SQL Server backups from ransomware attacks without requiring any additional software or licenses. We hope you enjoyed this demo. All our test results and best practices have been documented in a white paper and can be obtained by visiting purestorage.com. Thank you.
So I really wanted to, that I think is a fabulous demo, right? Because it's giving you an example of what it looks like if you have to restore your entire SQL Server environment, right? All your databases at once. So those were the numbers that you were able to get doing massive amounts of restores of large databases. The other interesting thing to think about that is if it's just a single database, let's say we had our major, like, our large database in our environment that we had to recover, you can get much better throughput than what you saw if you were storing your entire environment, right? Because we were hitting the limits of the flash blade of what it could push to a flash array, hitting what the flash array could ingest. So when it's a single database environment, we're seeing our restore times less than half of what he showed. So we're able to restore like these really large databases, our entire environment in about 20 minutes, but we can get around 10 minutes if it's just a single database, right? Multi-terabyte database. And I don't think you've ever been able to do that before with a regular backup. Again, your first go-to is going to be your flash array for snapshots. Those are really quick, and you can do the restore right from a SQL Server Management Studio GUI, or you have your backup with a flash blade. And again, all of those are protected. When you write them, they kind of take these snapshots so that they're read-only so that nobody can delete them. They roll off on the schedule that you set. I have listed up here all the resources that you would need. So the documentation on the SQL Server backup and restore is listed. I also included our platform guide and best practice guide. But I've also got the download for the SQL Server Management Studio plugin that lets you interact with a Pure Storage array. And then, of course, the documentation and the script repository if you want to start cloning out your dev test environment, or you want to script out maybe your DR environment for restores. All of that is listed here. I'm Marcia Pierce, and you heard Radamanga giving the demo for the restore. If you have any questions, please reach out to your local sales team here at Pure. But we're always happy to talk to our application folks and let them know how to rethink what they can do from their applications. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
All right, great presentation. Thank you so much, Marcia and Rada. I really appreciate that demo there of Microsoft SQL Server. That was cool. Monitoring, performance, dealing with database issues, protecting the database. Cool stuff. We got a ton of great questions coming in. Thank you, everyone, for the excellent questions. I've just brought up the poll question on the screen for everyone out there. What additional information would you like about the Pure Storage solution? And I'll leave that up for a moment and allow everyone to respond. We do appreciate your responses. These go back to the Pure Storage team. And while I leave that up, I'll be announcing our first Amazon $500 gift card. This gift card's going out to Larry Hosek from Texas. Congratulations, Larry Hosek from Texas. Still 2 more gift cards to give away on the EcoCast today, so make sure you stay tuned. All right, and thank you to all of those who submitted excellent questions. Those will help to enter you into the Best Question prize. And we will be routing all of these questions to Marcia and Rada over at Pure Storage. Unfortunately, we don't have time for any live Q&A right now on the EcoCast, but they will be getting back to you electronically. And we do appreciate your questions. Keep those good questions coming. We will be doing some live Q&A here coming up in a moment. Thank you to those who responded to the poll. It's now time to move on to our next presentation on today's EcoCast. I'm excited now to introduce Vanessa Toves, Solutions Architect for Microsoft 365 at Druva. Vanessa, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's great. Yeah, great to have you back. Take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. And let me get going here. So today we're going to be talking about how to protect your information in 365. My name is Vanessa Toves. I am by trade a solution architect for Microsoft, not directly for Microsoft, but I've dedicated my career to Microsoft technologies. And what that means is since the very first versions of server-based Sharepoint and their business intelligence enterprise platforms and all up into the cloud, into 365, I've worked with companies of all sizes and across industry to help them adopt those technologies, right? How do I use these technologies? And I really enjoyed that. But, when things started moving into the cloud and the adoption was a little slower, especially for corporate America. But what started happening was this messaging started to really stick with some corporations about protecting your 365 information, right? And, I think back to, it's like not a question even today that companies protect what's behind the firewall, right? They're protecting their servers and their databases and everything else. But for some reason, now moving into the cloud, there's less of that. So, 365, it's more secure or more reliable today than it was a year ago, than it was 5 years ago. And, there's purposes for things like a recycle bin. Not everything is in the recycle bin. Using retention has a very specific purpose in the ecosystem of 365. So the message is misleading. And it's misleading very much so because of what our customers are coming to us. Right? They're not necessarily coming to us and saying, hey, can you back up a file? Right? They're talking about their critical business issues that they're facing today, whether that issue is controlling the cost of the storage in 365, or what do I do? Right? We have to retain our employees for even exiting employees for 7 years. Whatever those critical business issues are, those are the things that basically make this messaging incorrect. Right? You must protect your 365 content, just as if it were behind your own firewall. Now, once you're in there, the threats that you're facing are different than you faced, right? Than companies faced before. Companies today that are still using on-premise versions, right? Compromised credentials, compromised endpoints, cyber attacks, and I have had to that, right? Users with access, whether it's authorized or not. And depending on what you've solved, right? What business problems have you solved? Are you solving today, and what do you plan to solve? That adoption of 365 and all of these apps and services equates to exposure over time. And then there's this slither of information that's in all throughout the entire tenant that's sensitive, right? And this number of 17.4%, when I first saw this, I think it was pretty close to what I kind of felt companies were doing, right? They were moving sensitive information, employee information, right, vendor information, customer information, and they were using SharePoint and using Teams and of course in their email. So that threat, it's not about just that you have threats, but what are you trying to protect against, right? You're trying to protect your information from being compromised. So for the customers that we have, this is one of the places that they go, right? This is one of the places that they can be reassured that their employees are getting backed up, that they're keeping their backups for the last 7 years, that their SharePoint, their Teams, their public folders, right? This is where they start and can ensure that they're being covered where that's concerned. Right? They start with InSync by Druva. Now, I recently supported the Microsoft Ignite conference, and in one of the security sessions, there was a poll about, what's on your mind. And ransomware was 60%, right? 60% of the people there. So it's there. It's on everyone's mind. But it's not necessarily just about ransomware where we're experiencing loss, and then we have to kind of protect against that. It's also admins, users, what do we do with our exiting employees' information? And to some extent also, right, Microsoft's actual development life cycle as well. Now, as we talk about what we're protecting, right, we go back to these critical business issues that companies face. It's not just about the backup, right? It's not about backup a file, backup an email, or restore a file, restore an email. Organizations need the ability to restore the process. See, that's what people are doing with 365 today, right? They're replacing manual processes. They're driving standards. This is where you go for your employee engagement. This is where you go. They're identifying these areas all throughout, and they're doing 365 in a number of ways, right? To save time, to save money, to stay in compliance. And compliance existed well before 365 did. And it will continue to exist regardless of what platform you're in. So, and there's also internal compliance that companies use all these apps, the various apps within 365. So when we talk about what we're protecting against and what we have to be able to cover, we're not just recovering a file, we're recovering the process. For how to be able to answer questions, how to get the appraisers back the files so the process can continue. Not so they can have that necessarily just to a particular email. Now, how is that the administration can be a threat or an issue? Depending on your size of the company and the investment also made with your support staff, right, you can have a ratio of like 45, 70 to 1. I've worked with companies where they've had 500 to 1,000 to 1,500 to 1. Right, and these admins that we have today, our admins are not just 365 admins, they're all Okta admins, Jira admins. So they're spread out across all of these cloud-based applications. And meanwhile, 365 itself, the administration of it is very wide and it's very deep. So the policies that you find all throughout there can do one thing. It can affect content. So I can understand how this person wiped out the chat of 145,000 users. It happens, and it could have very well happened. He got a ticket. Maybe the person knew or didn't know what was in the other side of that button. But what they did was they applied policy that wiped out the chat for a group that they didn't mean to wipe it out. There's no recovery from that. I can't recover from that point. Right, so the use of allowing too many global admins in your organization, I've seen that over and over. Right, utilize the role-based administration and try and help mitigate, try and help control where these admins have the ability to affect content that they didn't curate. Right? Now, throughout 365, there's all these apps and there's use cases where the recycle bin has no bearing, right? Bears no weight in terms of being able to get something back. Retention is not going to help, and the platform is up and running. So you can look to your own ticketing system and find that there's some common things that you're not able to be able to support. I can't restore something. I can't restore the site permissions or the site settings as it was yesterday, right? Let alone a week ago or ago. When Microsoft or any application makes something easier, users will use it. So creating a column, they're tagging their content, right? They're doing that so that they can move something maybe through a process, but they can also mass update a column and the values in there affecting their content. They can also delete this column on accident because it's very easy to do. So these things you cannot recover from. The move function in 365 or in SharePoint and OneDrive, the function works. There's nothing wrong with it. But the problem is when the user doesn't realize that that folder that they selected has 10,000 files, 400 folders, and 24 gigabytes of information. And they open up a ticket that sounds something like this. Hey, half my information is over here, and I think the other half is over here. Help. Right, all of these scenarios where the recycle bin's not going to help you, that you can't recover from them. And as a solution architect, I've designed solutions for HR or finance or anything that actually has a security model in place. For HR employee files, it was something like, I want 2 people to see everything, 3 people to see the active files, 4 people to see the terminated. Right, so these sites in your 365, they're being created and you're applying a security model in some areas that you have no ability to restore, right? I used to have access to this yesterday, I don't. Or I can see this now where I wasn't able to see this before. Something happened and, a year can go by and you need to be able to restore what was put in place, right? That architecture that was there for these areas. So all of these use cases, I just picked 4 and you'll find them all throughout 365 because that's kind of the nature of what's happening. It's such a big behemoth, right, platform. Now, why do I bring up the development lifecycle? With 45,000, maybe 50,000 engineers today, right? They're constantly rolling out fixes. They're creating new features, right? They're identifying that there's loss they're trying to address any kind of potential loss already. Now, it's the new features, though, that can have an impact for our company. Right? If you don't have your eyes on things, you're going to find that the employees begin to back up their desktops, right? Back up my desktop, my documents, my pictures up into my OneDrive. And I'd say when we're talking about this backup, that stuff goes up into your individual's OneDrive. Now, OneDrive is 2 things. It's a storage area for my stuff. It's also a sync technology that's used for OneDrive and SharePoint, and that brings a folder down into your File Explorer. Right? So when I would use this, or when I would show people this, you'd find that probably maybe 5% of a company was using the OneDrive sync. So now when organizations see this awesome feature that, was just rolled out, what they're not realizing is there's some major implications that come with this backup, right? Backing up my desktop. And the first thing being, you're bringing this down now. Remember, all of that 17.4% that we talked about before, now that we're backing up our desktop, that number has increased. We've got more information that is now in my OneDrive. And now, with compromised credentials, compromised endpoints, and cyber attacks, those pointers to the SharePoint files, to things that are highly sensitive, are right there. Someone doesn't have to go and navigate to try and figure out where these employee files are, right? It's there on the desktop. So this ransomware has the ability to delete, modify, or encrypt these files that are right there. So there's a lot of potential impacts when these new features come out and you don't necessarily have the ability to support it or understand what's happening, right? Understand what the long-term implications are of turning this on for a company of 1,000 employees. Now, OneDrive itself as a backup, I think it's good that Microsoft did something, but when we're talking about an enterprise backup, right, a company's ability to restore their enterprise, restore from anywhere, restore more than just 1 or 2 or 3 people. Right? That is one of the differences, one of the core differences is the level in which it supports the entire organization. So if you need to restore, a person can absolutely restore their OneDrive back to sometime within the last 30 days. But when we're doing legal or e-discovery, when we're supporting a legal case, we're not talking about, the attorneys aren't asking for things that just happened yesterday. They're asking for things that happened 6 months ago or a year ago. So if this information is deleted and gone, there's no way of getting that back. And that's why we talk about, right, OneDrive backup is not an enterprise-ready backup solution for an organization. So we've talked about all these things about just the areas where information within 365, where 365 you have to protect this. Now we'll just talk a little bit about how Druva can protect your 365 content. Now it starts with your tenant, and we connect with your Azure AD. We also interact with your content within 365, and we do so with the API services. And we utilize and connect to your Azure AD. And then there's our Druva Cloud Platform. Now, when you're connected, or when we're managing it, we've got the management console, and then you have the ability to also have some self-service for your end users. We'll talk more about controlling that, right? Who can do that in a few slides from now. But this is where we connect to our Druva services, and our Druva services protects Microsoft 365, protects Google, Salesforce, and we're going to continue to add on to those the cloud-based applications that organizations need to protect. Now, connecting to your content, this is one of the nice things about being able to get in and get going, right? If you're a person that wants to do the free trial, you get in and can actually be backing up your email, backing up a SharePoint, a team, within 15 minutes. So you connect with a global account, right, a global admin account, and you have to use a global admin account at first because we're provisioning an app within your Azure AD. So there's certain things that just have to happen, but after the fact, you can always taper your permissions down for that account that's performing this action, that's making that connection. Now, when we connect to your content, we have a constant connection with OAuth using OAuth 2.0 with your Azure AD. So if you add a new user will automatically get pushed into your Druva console, and they'll follow through the process of automatically being able to be backed up, right? So their Exchange and their OneDrive, access to your SharePoint content in your Exchange, your OneDrive, your SharePoint and Teams, all of that is also done through the Microsoft API services, right? So that layer. Now, when we're backing things up, we're doing a read, and we're going to go out and grab that content and create a backup and put that in the AWS cloud. And when we're doing an update back, when we're pushing content back into your tenant, that's when an admin says, hey, I need to make a backup of this team, and I want to create a new team, right? I'm going to create a new team. I want the same people. I want the same channels. I want the same members. I want the same content. Right? So that's how we're creating. We support that creating anew. Now, as a solution, as an admin, right, in the past, or even a solution architect when I was doing software selections for customers, what I was looking for was platforms that had granularity and flexibility in their model, in their application. So when we're talking about the flexibility, right, similar to 365's role-based administration, you have the same thing. Not everyone needs to be a cloud admin, nor should they. Right? So you can utilize the out-of-the-box role-based functions, or you can actually create customized roles and assign them to your admins, or maybe your legal, right, your legal team. Now, the user provisioning, we talked a little bit about that, right? It's cyclical and it's automatic. So you add a user, that user gets pushed automatically into Druva, and we're protecting them. So you don't have to go back there and add them one at a time. Now, our profile is something similar to a Microsoft 365 group in that users, you can have multiple users belong to a particular profile and tweak that profile depending on your needs. So you might have an executive leadership team profile, and you want to back up their emails and their OneDrive or their Google Drive 3 times a day. And you might have a different group for your finance that you just back up, 2 times a day. You might have a third one for your call center agents that you're only backing them up 1 time a day. So that's the flexibility model that we talked about, right? The flexibility in the architecture that I was looking for. Now, for companies that use the multi-geo functionality of 365, you need the ability to support that within your backups as well. So once you define your storage areas, depending on where you are throughout the globe, right, you define these mappings. And Mary Jane, when she comes in, she's automatically going to go to the EU, right? Because she's got Germany as an example. She's going to go into the EU storage. John Smith comes in and he's in the U.S. He's going to go into the U.S. West one. And the same thing applies to your SharePoint and your Teams. So we actually use the metadata that's associated with users and your SharePoint and Teams to help you manage that and stay in compliance, right? To make sure that you're not saving things that were created and that were curated in Germany or the UK. You're not saving them in the United States. Now, as a solution architect, again, I talk about that solution architect all the time. When I'm creating things in 365, I'm not just doing them in a silo, like in one app. So solutions are created with SharePoint, with Teams, with Power Automate, maybe Power Apps, and Power BI, right? You have this collective. That's like one of the things I love about it is that you can build a solution, but they're across multiple applications. So I think the same, though, goes true for protecting your Microsoft 365 information, right? We close the gap on helping you protect that information where Microsoft isn't doing the same thing for you. So I would say, if you're, like I said before, if you're self-servicing, take advantage of the free trial, or you can get a more in-depth demo of all the features. How do we protect 365? What's the granularity level within SharePoint? How do I preserve a user that's left the company? And so a lot of these questions will go into a lot more detail on a more in-depth demo. I think at this point in time, we've got our Q&A right now, I believe, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do have a lot of questions coming in for you from the audience while you were presenting there. Great presentation, by the way, Vanessa. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've just brought up this poll question for everyone out there that says, what additional information would you like about the Druva solution? And we'll leave that up while we take your questions submitted there in the questions box. If something's on your mind, now's the time to get it in. And as Vanessa talked about, if you'd like to get a personal demo, that is on the poll right there, as well as a number of other resources or options. So we appreciate your response to that. So let's see, first question that came in, Vanessa, I wanted to ask you, they're asking, what's the licensing model around this? Is it based on volume or is it based on, say, user count?
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. So it's based on license, right? So if you have a license for a user in Exchange, that number is the same number that we're talking about in terms of your licensing. I'm not the licensing expert, but I know it's per license. But we don't charge, though, for, you can have 1,000 users and 10,000 teams and, SharePoint sites. So your SharePoint and your teams are just included as part of that license. So you're not paying an additional cost in terms of the content that's outside of what, an employee's email or their OneDrive.
Okay, interesting. Good point. Thank you. Another question here, Hans is asking about how does Druva meet data residency requirements?
Yeah, I think I talked about that in that last slide. We support our multi-geo. It's one of the nice things, especially for companies that are multi-geo, right? You have to keep your employees' emails and their files in the storage. You're in compliance with like GDPR as an example, so you can't save their information in the U.S. We support that both with our user base as well as your SharePoint and your teams as well.
Okay, nice. Here's kind of a technical question. I'm not sure about this one, but maybe you are you able to restore a Power Automate workflow in SharePoint if a site is deleted by accident?
No, currently today we're not doing Power Automate. In fact, we're going through our planning, and there's certain things that I've pushed to the top of the list as to what the next apps are that we're going to be incorporating, and Power Automate is right on top of that list.
Got it. Okay. And then another question, what about, I lost it. Here it is. Security. So you all back up, say my Microsoft Office 365 or Microsoft 365 data. Who has access to that data? Can Druva see that data, or is it secured?
That's a great question. The only time Druva can see any of this information is if you bring them into your console at all, right? So, but no, during the encryption process, we have no access to, during the encryption process or even after the fact. So we don't have direct access by any means to any of your content. So no one on our can actually go in and download your emails, right?
That's good to know. Important point. Next question here: how long can I keep information of someone that's left the company?
That's another good question. So you can actually use one of what's called a preferred preserve user. So you have your active users and you have preserved license users as well, or preserve users. And you can keep them for however long that you need to. So, when we talked about that profile earlier, some companies are creating a profile and they might keep it, right? Their policy that they're creating in Druva is to keep it indefinitely or to keep it for 7 years. So when that user is part of that profile, it's going to inherit that. So that's really fully customizable to what the customer wants.
Got it. Okay. And then, see, another question here. My TAM said I don't need backup. Are they wrong? So a TAM, for anyone who may not know what that is, that's a technical account manager. It could be from a partner. It could be from Microsoft. I hope my presentation proved that the answer to that, and that is they are wrong. They're incorrect. Maybe they're being misled, or they've listened to this messaging in the past. But you do need to protect your information, right? It's not about protecting Microsoft 365. It's about protecting your information inside of 365. Great point. And then there is a question here about what do you feel makes Druva stand out kind of in the crowd from other perhaps similar solutions in concept?
Yeah, that's even a good question. So I joined Druva last fall, and it was a major transition for my career, going from being a solution architect to actually going into and working for a company. So I interviewed across the organization. I watched every single video that there was. I actually even got a free trial. I think what I liked about it is I stepped back to the times where I was doing software selections and what I was looking for, right? Because what I was looking for always represented what a customer, I was always representing a customer's need. They didn't know necessarily what to look for. So I think the first thing I was impressed with was the user interface. It's very clean and it's very easy to use. So I think for these admins that are jumping all over, and even legal admins that have to come into any kind of enterprise backup platform, you have to have a good, clean user interface, and they've stayed true to that. The other thing is being responsive to where our customers are going and what they're using and what they're asking for. As the engineering department, where engineers are concerned, I've had such an amazing experience being part of this team and to help direct or influence the direction. So we're listening to our customers and responding to those, to what our customers are needing. And I really love it. I mean, I love working for Druva.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up. There are some more technical questions here for you in the queue that perhaps you can respond to electronically. But a great presentation again. Thank you for being on, Vanessa.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
And for more information on Druva, of course, we appreciate your response there to the poll. Also check out in the handouts tab, there is a link to a Druva asset entitled Cloud Architect's Guide to Microsoft 365 Backup. So make sure that you download that resource as well. And I'll just leave up the poll while I announce our next Amazon $500 gift card winner. This is going out to James DeRuiter from Wisconsin. Congratulations, James DeRuiter from Wisconsin. Still got another gift card to give out on the event today. And of course, don't forget about the best question prizes as well. And now I'm excited to introduce you to our next presenters on today's EcoCast. Welcome Corinne Bissett, Technologist for Product Strategy, and Edward Watson, Senior Global Product Marketing Manager, both at Veeam. Corinne, Edward, great to have you on.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much for having us. Do we sound okay?
Sound great. Loud and clear. Take it away.
Okay, sounds great. All right. So we're going to have a little bit of fun here, guys. We're going to cover something that, is on everyone's mind. Many individuals and admins and organizations are now adopting Microsoft Teams backup. So I thought, why don't we give the audience here 8 different facts that you need to know when you are considering backing up Microsoft Teams. So jumping right in, we can't really talk about backing up Office 365 or backing up Microsoft Teams without actually starting with the why. Because we don't do this for fun, right? We don't just back up for fun. There are some real critical reasons why we back up, whether that be user error, whether that be thinking something's protected when it might not be, in the case of retention policies and some of the confusion that can happen around them. Whether that be internal security threats, rogue employees, whether that be external security threats, we know ransomware is becoming more and more sophisticated, or even things like legal and compliance, where we need much more granularity than what Office 365 is able to give us natively. Hybrid deployments only compound that complexity, so that's definitely a reason to streamline backup and data protection policies. And kind of what we're going to be focusing more on today is around the Teams data structure and kind of some of the complexity on the back end that warrants it even more so the need to back up. What's probably even more interesting, or just as interesting, is the fact that, these reasons really are concerns. You can kind of go down the list there and kind of see all the different reasons that I've just discussed. But what's even more interesting, perhaps, than the reasons themselves is that SaaS admins actually understand that these are concerns, even more so than it seems the backup admins. We asked the question in a survey, what are your primary reasons for protecting the data from Office 365? And it seems that the SaaS admins actually had these reasons even more at the top of their mind, even more on their radar. Accidental deletion, of course, user error is the top of the list. Preparation against cyber attacks, very high as well. And of course, compliance and regulation and internal policies for data retention as well. So again, all of these reasons really are on our radars. So now for fact number 2, and this really gets into how Teams actually work. So Teams is not a self-contained application. And okay, what do I mean by that, and where am I going? I'll get there. Microsoft Word, for instance, is a self-contained application. You save the Word document either to your hard drive or somewhere else. I know where the data is. I click on the document, and it opens. Exchange Server really works very much the same way. It's a self-contained application. Running on-prem, the mail and the calendar info is all stored there in Microsoft Exchange Information Store. And these are self-contained applications. Microsoft Teams represents somewhat of a shift in the way that Microsoft has been doing things lately. So the Teams data is essentially leveraging things like Exchange, SharePoint Online, and OneDrive for Business, and is essentially more scattered data than what these other self-contained applications are. And so whether it's the contacts calendars, which are stored in Exchange Online, whether it's the team files, tabs, OneNote saved in SharePoint, or the chat files themselves, you can see that these applications are being leveraged by Teams. And that brings me to fact number 3, which kind of ties into fact number 3, and that's that there is now a legacy method of protecting that data. So if you think back, before Microsoft APIs were released, there was essentially the ability to basically leverage these sources, right? So Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, you could essentially back up the data from these sources. But that was pretty much all you were limited to being able to actually accomplish. So now with fact number 4, not all backup solutions are created equal, you can see that many backup vendors have started to leverage this Teams API. And what they've been able to do, like what Veeam has been able to do, is essentially not only protect the data within those 3 sources, but also the metadata and configurations. So why is that important? Well, when it comes to leveraging the metadata and configurations, what that allows is much more restore granularity, whether that be Teams channels and tabs, and much more restore efficiency as well. So now being able to back up the metadata and configurations, Veeam has essentially leveraged these APIs in a very powerful way. And that brings me to fact number 5, that really when you're looking at backing up Microsoft Teams, you should be looking at a purpose-built Teams backup, which essentially puts you in the driver's seat and gives you effortless control over that backup. So by integrating with those Microsoft APIs, we're, again, backing up that metadata from the source side, and the data, once we go to recover it, knows exactly where it's supposed to belong. We're not searching, finding, hunting down, and having to find the exact spot where that recovered data existed in. It now knows where it should be when that restore occurs. And of course, with Veeam Backup for Office 365, you get the ability to back up many Teams objects, whether that's channels, settings, applications, and tabs, as well as components, and essentially back up as often as you need, leveraging a variety of storage options. Corinne's actually going to be covering a variety of different storage options in the next few slides. And that brings me to fact number 6, which is that really for most organizations today, especially if you're backing up Microsoft Teams or even just Office 365 as a whole, you really should be looking at leveraging something that's fast and easy to use, especially when it comes to your recovery needs. So we actually have this specialized application, this Explorer for Microsoft Teams, which we've actually had we've had these Explorers for many, many years. Customers are very familiar with them. We have one for SharePoint, we have one specific for OneDrive, we have one specific for Exchange, and now we have developed this brand new one, specifically for Teams, that really enhances that restoration process, really gives you that fast and automated restore process. Recover with much more granularity than many other vendors in the market, with send, save, and export capabilities. And we actually have over 40 different ways to recover. So Corinne's actually going to walk us through those in the next few slides. And that brings me to fact number 7, which is that granular e-discovery for Teams will help you quickly meet legal and compliance options. So I alluded at the beginning to the fact that many organizations have those legal and compliance needs, and of course sometimes we know that those native capabilities do not meet our needs, but with a third-party backup solution, generally that does expand our capabilities when it comes to being able to quickly meet those legal and compliance needs. And with Veeam, really we're giving you the broadest set of search criteria, really helping you meet those legal needs in a very timely manner, finding that needle in a haystack, that individual file or document you need, and of course, enabling you to quickly search and find within conversations within a team. And lastly, backup solutions have to scale. We know this. And, Veeam Backup for Office 365, we did start as an SMB product, and we've expanded to commercial, and, we've done great things in the enterprise. But with version 5, we've really, really expanded those enterprise capabilities, giving you the ability to browse the UI for over 100K objects, 2 times faster Office 365 data movement to object storage, with parallel processing capabilities as well for those massive SharePoint online lists. So again, these are some 8 facts, and I hope that you take these with a grain of salt. But again, definitely, if 1 or 2 of these facts stood out to you, then great. That hopefully will help you as you're looking and investigating Office 365 backup solutions. So with that, I'm actually going to pass it over to Corinne, and Corinne's going to walk us through some more technical features, and we will get a demo underway as well. So take it away, Corinne.
Thank you. So coming into the product itself, we have a ton of flexible different types of deployment options, whether you're running a completely Office 365 environment or if you're still on an on-prem and or hybrid scenario. You're able to add the entire organization into one console. If you do run multiple tenants, you could also add those multiple tenants into the same console to help create a centralized management area. When sending off or making a decision about storage, you can go with an on-prem type of storage, such as local or an S3 compatible type of storage, or you can send directly to object storage. Now, the beauty about this is we don't lock you into either one of these storage types. If you do decide later that business makes more sense to be on-prem or in the cloud, you're able to seamlessly migrate that data to those entities. And we talked about the Teams Explorer a little earlier here, but we have 4 different explorers that offer many, many different types of restore options, whether you're trying to restore back to your original location or to new locations with Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, and of course, with version 5, we now have Teams. What this looks like is, well, this entire column here. And if you notice, the data isn't just being restored in raw data formats. They're being restored in data formats that make sense to the application that we're working with. A great example here is Exchange is being restored if you export as a PST or an MSG file. And over in SharePoint, we're working with documents, lists, and files. And in Teams, of course, we're looking at channels and tabs. And we're able to granularly restore those items back to the original locations with all their permissions, files, and settings. Email those files out to an end user, which is one of my favorite features, especially when you're looking at something to make your help desk life simplistic, is you can email directly from the console to satisfy a ticket for an end user requesting a file without having to first export, re-download, move over to the proper computer, and then satisfying the ticket request. It makes it one easy motion to get that data back to that end user. And we'll take a closer look at what the console looks like here in the demo. Let's see here. And let me know when you can see the screen.
I can see it.
Yep, looks good.
Perfect. So this is the Veeam backup for Microsoft Office 365 console. You can make as many jobs and granularly scope down the jobs to whatever makes sense to your infrastructure. Adding an organization is simple as installing and hitting Add Organization at the top. And you can also separate and segment your repositories to whatever makes sense to the business, whether you're trying to separate, say, by finance, HR, and help desk, or if you want to send it directly to an object storage type, you can do that directly from here. One of the great things about the object storage is you're able to add a password to encrypt that data to that object storage. And we keep a local cache of the data that's being moved to the object storage, so you're not always getting charged whenever you're viewing what data is out there. Taking a closer look at the jobs here, we'll take a look at the Teams backup job. You can scope in and add as many users, groups, sites, or different teams that you'd like to configure. You can also add your entire organization and scope down whether you want just Teams, sites, OneDrive, or your archive. Coming over to exclude, the list is just as dynamic, so you could have an entire inclusion list and just exclude what is necessary from your environment. The job run is also very flexible, meaning you can run the job as often as makes sense to your business, not based on, okay, you can only run this once a day, or even running it continuously. So as soon as the job completes, you're already backing up the next set of data for your organization. Before we dive directly into the Explorers, I'm going to take a look over here at Teams, and just to demonstrate how easy it is to get a file back and how fast it is to get that file back to the organization, I'm going to go ahead and delete a file from here and go through some of those explorers to see how we can get that data back. For Exchange, just to take a quick peek here, all of your mailbox and email items are in a format that you would expect almost as if you're looking at Exchange itself to restore data. Coming over to SharePoint, you have your databases and all of the data that's underneath of each of those sites. OneDrive, of course, is just a file folder where you have all of these folders underneath of your organization, like a text document. And coming over to Teams. Now, in Teams, each Explorer has an option to be able to search for files and do an advanced search. But we're going to search for that file that I just deleted. And all I'm doing is searching by the file fields, the name category, and saying that it contains OSI, not even the full file name. And what it's doing is going through my entire backup archive, so I don't even have to know which site and document that this was removed from in order to search the entire organization to find that file. Coming down to the sites and documents where we did have that file at, we can see the general options, you can see your post, you can see the files, which is what we are looking for, but even the tabs that were added to that organization saying if you have Planner mapped in, you can re-establish a map to Planner in a OneNote. Taking a look at the files that we can restore, you can restore either this version, previous versions from this console directly, and this is the send option where you're able to send as an email attachment directly back to the end user that file instead of waiting for it to be exported, re-imported. I could take a quick look to make sure that this is the correct file I need to restore back to the original location. And of course, the restore option. There is an authentication that needs to happen. You have to type in the password for an administrator account that has access to restore. Then you have the option if you are restoring multiple files, maybe just restoring changed or missing items could help save time for mass restores. And the latest version. If you're getting a request that states that they only need the latest version of a file that gets updated, say, hundreds of times a day, you're able to just give them back the data that they need without having to restore all of those extra versions, saving a lot of time getting that data back to that end user. Now, this is restoring directly back from the backup files to the original location. You'll get a successful message for each file that was successfully restored. And coming back over here, we'll go ahead and do a quick refresh. And we're able to see that file's back in the original location where it should be. And again, with the original metadata because it's all being backed up within that job. That's what I have. Back to you, Edward.
Great demo. Thank you for sharing that, Corinne. So we've got a few takeaways that we'd encourage you to follow here. We do encourage you to read up or share the conversational Microsoft Teams backup ebook that we worked on with Brian Posey, who is a 19-time Microsoft MVP. We do encourage you to read this if you're more interested in much more detail around Microsoft Teams backup. So we have actually included this in the links available as a handout in this session. And of course, we encourage you to see for yourself. You can go to veeam.com and you can actually experience unlimited feature capabilities free for 30 days. So again, we do encourage you to download the product. And again, if you are a smaller organization or if you'd like to just back up a department, we do offer also our community edition, which is limited to 10 users completely free. So again, you can hold on to this product for the long haul and again, use this completely free as well if you have a lower amount of users in your org you'd like to back up. And with that, David, I think we're ready for open Q&A.
Excellent. Yeah, great demo. Really love seeing the product in action. Thank you for taking time to do that. A great presentation, as always, from the Veeam team. And so I've just brought up this poll question for everyone out there. I'll leave this up while we take your questions from the audience. The question on the screen is, what additional information would you like about the Veeam solution? So a lot of good questions have come in. Where do I start? First one, they're asking, what about, let's see, lengthy question. What's the smallest frequency of Teams backup your solution supports? So I guess the question is, how frequently would the data be protected?
So it's nearly continuous. As soon as a job ends, you could have another job kicking off by setting a very low periodic full. So if you set it to 5 minutes and it only takes 5 minutes for your job to run, you'll continuously be running a job.
Got it. Okay, that's great. And then Julian's asking, how does Veeam consolidate the data in Teams, OneDrive, and Microsoft 365 in a hybrid environment without duplication of data? And then what would recovery look like?
So whenever you have data, generally you have a data set that's still on-prem and you have a data set that's in the cloud. It doesn't have a bunch of overlap, but the user is a cloud user. We'd back up the cloud side. If there's an on-prem footprint for, say, Sharepoint or Exchange, then we would back up those Sharepoint and Exchange data ends that are on-prem in the organization.
Got it. Okay. And then
they'd all be from the same console. Sorry, I forgot the last part of the question.
No, that's good. That's good to know. There's a question here about e-discovery. Could you share more details about e-discovery and how that would work with Veeam?
You want to take this one, Edward?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when it comes to common use cases, there are always a variety of different ways our customers use the product and for various reasons. But one that does come to mind is definitely the legal and compliance needs. So we do find that many companies just need to get hold of their data faster and find it faster than ever. So whether it's for a recovery, whether it's for legal and compliance, these are all very valid use cases. And certainly just having the ability to search your entire Teams organization in a flash, as opposed to having to go and dig in deep through manual processes is always appreciated by our customers.
Right, and our advanced search option makes it that fast, the one that we demonstrated for Teams. But there is one for every Explorer application.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah, I love the Explorers. You guys have done a great job with those over the years. There's a next question. They're asking if Veeam can support multi-geo.
So we don't support multi-geo at this time. It would have to be the home organization tenant.
Got it. Okay. And then next question, they're asking if Veeam can protect SharePoint online.
Yeah, so actually, we did focus on Teams today, right? But we also have our main solution, Veeam Backup for Office 365, also protects SharePoint Online, OneDrive for business data, as well as Exchange Online. So this is a hybrid product as well. So your on-prem environment as well. So while we did focus on Teams, we can protect the whole gamut.
Excellent. And then there's a question here, are all backup vendors using the new Microsoft API for Teams?
You know, I think it all depends. I know some are and some aren't, right? Veeam, we always pride ourselves on making sure that we are leveraging all the latest APIs. And certainly my recommendation for you would be, that would be one of the first questions I ask is, you know, how is your relationship with Microsoft, and are you leveraging those APIs for the best efficiency when it comes to my backups?
Great point. And then what about storing the data? Once we back it up, what kind of storage options does Veeam provide?
We provide anything from an on-prem storage to directly to object storage and the ability to move whenever it makes sense to that business.
Nice. And then the question here is, I use litigation holds for backups. Why should I use Veeam?
Yeah, you know, it almost seems that every webinar someone brings up a native capability or two. And, you know, my recommendation would be that, you know, using native Office 365 capabilities does not equate to what most people consider a traditional backup. So if you are using something like litigation hold, that is specifically designed for legal proceedings, right, and freezing all of the data and really limited recovery options, it gets kind of messy. So for anyone leveraging native capabilities versus having a traditional backup, I think you really have to look at the limitations, especially when it comes to recovery and just being able to search and find that data, getting it as quickly as possible.
Nice. And a couple mentions here, Veeam. Mike says that they use Veeam Backup for Office 365 and Veeam Backup for Enterprise. Works great, almost set and forget. Randall said we use Veeam to back up all of our VMware servers and the Office 365 Veeam Backup. It's great software. So a lot of love for Veeam. We always get that on our events here as well. With that, I think we've covered pretty much all the questions that have come in. So it's a good stopping point to wrap up. Corinne and Edward, a great presentation. It's great to have you on.
Thank you for
Great,
having
thanks,
us.
David. Yeah, and thanks for all the Veeam love. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to Veeam, of course, for supporting the event today and a really cool demo. Again, appreciate the demo. I want to point out in the Handouts tab, you'll find a link right there that will take you to the Veeam conversational book, Microsoft Teams for Backup. You can download the full ebook by Brian Posey, Microsoft MVP. And that's the book that Edward and Corinne talked about in their presentation. So make sure you check out that resource. Also, don't forget about the poll question that's on the screen. We do appreciate your response to that. I'll just leave that up while I announce our final and third gift card winner. This is going to Cameron Moore from Nebraska. Congratulations, Cameron Moore from Nebraska. We'll be reaching out to all the winners after the event, and we'll also be reaching out to the best question prize winners as well. We've gotten a ton of questions that have come in today, so thank you for those in advance. We do appreciate that. And before you go, I want to remind everyone, don't forget to check us out over in the iTunes Store, the 10 on Tech podcast. If you are a potential sponsor of an upcoming event, we'd love to chat. Reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And today, of course, we talked about supporting, securing, and enhancing Microsoft-Centric environments. Well, next week, we'll be talking about the tools that supercharge a VMware environment. That's happening 1 week from today, next Wednesday. So we hope to see you there. And, of course, we'll be hearing from Synology and Druva on that event, and also have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. Congratulations, of course, to all the prize winners. I will post those in the chat right now. That is done. And of course, thank you so much to everyone out there in the audience for joining us on the EcoCast today. I hope that you learned a lot. Have a great day. See you next time. Bye-bye.